Hey, good morning, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world, and whenever you're watching this, either live or on the recording. Excited to be here again for another episode of On Being a First Time Leader. And the show is originated out of which most of my great things come out of pain and as a result of pain and suffering. So I have been in the situation of being a first time leader many times, moving from job to job, or when I very, very first became a leader or a supervisor or a manager, and with no help. And so we are here today to very skilled leaders to help you with any questions, comments, criticisms that you have about being a leader and what we can help you with. And I'm so excited to have my guest here today, who is Judy Gielniak, and we met through our coaching school, IPEC, Institute for Professional Excellence in Coaching. And we are here to answer your questions and to tell stories and anecdotes about our past and how we have overcome some of the things that all first-time leaders will encounter at some time. So Judy, welcome. And how about if you introduce yourself?
Absolutely. So my name is Judy Gielniak. Hi, everyone. I'm excited to be here. I'm a career coach, and I help clients with a variety of career goals, including leadership development. Some of the other goals I've helped clients attain include gaining career direction, effectively managing chronic workplace stress. That's a big one that comes up. Improving work-life balance is also a big one. Of course, there's career transition. Also helping a client right now with streamlining his career growth. So he wants to get to where he wants to be faster. So that's been a lot of fun working with him on that. My mission and that of my company, Accomplished Life Coaching and Consulting, is to help people increase fulfillment and satisfaction in their work so that they love what they do for a living. I feel super passionate about that because I feel like we all have the ability and the right to enjoy what we do. And I know from personal experience and also from lots of studies that have been done that when we connect with that happiness in our work, our lives and our well-being are really enhanced as a result. So I just love what I'm doing now with clients and love thinking that I can help people attain that as well.
That's awesome. When you see my head down, I'm writing notes, or okay. I'm thinking, oh, I have to ask Judy about that. The thing that comes to mind right away for me, for that you said that you were really specialized in, which most first-time leaders deal with, is chronic stress.
Yes.
So, tell us some more about what would be your advice for first-time leaders experiencing stress from everywhere?
Yes, it's completely normal. I mean, we're not going to get rid of stress, but there are ways that we can look at it differently. So, for instance, I use mindset exercises quite a bit with my clients when we talk about chronic stress. There are times that when it's chronic and we're having the same issue over and over again, there are times that we can actually look at what's really happening. What are our beliefs about that? What are some of the things that are happening? Is this within our locus of control even? Sometimes it is, and sometimes it's not. So I really like to look at how can we help people achieve that happiness and manage that stressor so that they can be happy in their jobs right where they are. And there are times that we can really achieve that. Other times we look at like what changes can you make if this is outside of your control? And that might be to get a new position. Or it might be, having a conversation with a superior or something. But really, for me and for a lot of my clients, the key has been mindset, taking a look at that first. So that's where we start.
Well, I have another question, but I'd like to get back to mindset because I find that fascinating. So I come up with this theory, and it's not scientific at all, but I wanted to know what you think about it, that people that have chronic stress, it's harder to deal with because it's almost become like you get used to it. Like you get used to your shoulders being up here. You don't know any different.
Right.
And
It becomes ingrained.
Comes ingrained.
Becomes ingrained, and it's hard to shift that on our own sometimes.
Mhm.
It's become a habit in our brains, and the neuroscience shows that when we have the same thoughts over and over, they're just automatic. We can't even stop them. And sometimes we're not even aware of them. And that's what's great about coaching or talking with anyone who can help you work through those thoughts is it sheds light on that. It sheds light and brings awareness to the fact that these thoughts might be actually causing you the stress more than the stressful event itself. A lot of it is just unpacking what's really going on, getting down into the details of why is this stressful, what is happening.
Yeah, so there might be a lot of digging involved.
Yes, lots of digging.
So it's a partnership then. The client that you have comes to you willing and wanting to make a change.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. And it's amazing. A lot of times I'll work with clients first on mindset before we even get into goal setting. Because what happens is once they gain an understanding of where their current level of mindset is and what changes they can then make when stressful events occur, a lot of times their goals will actually change as a result. So the goals they came in with change a little bit, or sometimes a lot, depending on what insights they've gained just through a first session on mindset. So,
do you want to tell us more about mindset? Because I'd be interested to know what that means to you. Because it's kind of a word we hear a lot now. So I'd like to know what you think it means and how you would help someone with their mindset.
Right. So I use an instrument called the Energy Leadership Index assessment. And so what this is an online assessment. It's about 80 questions. It takes about half an hour to do. And what it measures is one's current level of mindset. So this is an attitudinal assessment. It's not a anything like a Myers-Briggs or anything like that. It's different, and it measures that mindset and it generates a report that clients then get access to. And what I do is I sit down with a client. It's all remote, but I say sit down with a client by Zoom, and we spend about 2 hours going through the report. And I will debrief it in detail with them because there's a lot of learning that is involved when we look at this and when we talk about mindset. And a lot of times clients don't have previous experience doing this, and why would they, right? And so I do spend about 2 hours with clients debriefing it, and then also helping them figure out how to integrate their learning into changes in their lives. So a lot of it is based on just whatever's happening for them, whether it's maybe there's an issue happening at home because they work so much. There's not a good level of work-life balance. So we take a look at that as well through mindset. Anything, like I said, our brains work in a way that they're designed to be efficient. So our habits really come into play there, and what we think, what our mindset is, really comes into play. It's just automatic. So shining that awareness on what are the thoughts you're having, and where are they coming from, really is very, very. I think it's one of the keys to the human experience. Actually, is understanding that and being able to then reframe and change those thoughts to something that supports us better, and that leads to better outcomes.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. So if I understand you correctly, you dig in and you take this energy leadership assessment, and so energy and mindset are kind of interchangeable for you?
Yes, they are interchangeable for me. So this is measuring 7 levels of energy. I also use the word mindset
Okay.
energy as well, because that's sort of what they represent to me. But they are energy levels, and each one has different characteristics associated with it. And so then a client will gain an understanding of which energy of level he or she resonates in most, in both in normal circumstances and also in times of stress and challenge.
I see. And then it sounds like a part of your process is like you go in and then you come up with action. So it's like you're dealing with their thoughts, their emotions,
Yes.
and changing it into actions, changeable actions, or actions that result in change that they want.
Right, that bring about certain outcomes. So every thought leads to an emotion, which leads to an action, which leads to an outcome, right? Exactly. And so when we break it down and look at, okay, what's happening to you? What do you want to happen instead? Let's work backwards. What do you want to happen instead? And then what is the emotion? What's the energy level? You know, what energy level is going to best support you? What mindset level best support you with this, and what are the thoughts and emotions that are helpful, that match up with the characteristics of that energy level. And it's interesting that you can break it down so logistically, the emotions that we have, and these experiences that we're having that are so challenging. But when you do that and you practice it over time, it really does work.
I had a statistics teacher told me one time that every answer is a mathematical question, is a mathematical problem. Like you can put it into and you can come up with, and it sounds like you're saying da 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 equals.
Yes. Yes, and it's a practice. It's not something, it's work. It's just like any good thing in life. Most of the time we have to work really hard for that, right? So this is just that. It's a practice. Just like any other, if you want to meditate, that's a practice as well, right? Learning to do it. So it's just like any other practice, but it's nice for your mind, and it gets easier over time, of course.
And when we were in the green room, so to speak, before we went live, we had a discussion, and I did write down a question: are your negative thoughts holding you back? That you had said that, and that ties in perfectly with what we're saying.
Yeah, and many times they are, right? Because we engage in the same actions that result in the same outcomes in our lives when we have those negative.
Exactly. We don't even know it. We're just that's just what we do.
Yes, and that's not to say that every circumstance in our workplace is controllable. Because if you're working with a toxic person, you don't control other people, but you can only control what's within us, right? And so there's some times where we have to pick ourselves up and relocate to a new environment sometimes, get a new position, a new job. But I would say more often than not, there are definitely things we can do to increase our happiness, to work through those, chronic challenges that we're experiencing in ways that are really supportive and make us happier.
Yeah, I would say simple, but not easy.
Simple, I think that's really well put. Very well put.
Another thing that we spoke about, that with my very small market research of first-time leaders, in addition to chronic stress, was imposter syndrome. And you had said, when we were in the green room, you had said something I hadn't heard, which I really love, that we all crave safety in numbers. And part of the imposter syndrome, correct me if I'm wrong, was that people felt a part of, and therefore like very unsafe, vulnerable.
Yes.
Do you want to tell us more about that?
Yeah, so I did some research a while back on imposter syndrome, and kind of our negative thoughts also kind of relate back to this as well. But because the idea that our negative thoughts are there to protect us. So imposter syndrome is also there as a biological form of protection, because the theory is that way back when there was safety in numbers, and we didn't want to rock the boat or to stand out from our peers, our clan, and be seen as someone to be kicked out of the group, right? Because then, it meant almost certain death. Way back when, right? There were safety numbers, and we needed to maintain that. So that imposter syndrome, or those negative self thoughts that we have, part of the human experience, are there as a form of protection, and that's the biological reason why, is that they're there. But fast forward to today, they're not really serving us anymore, because we don't need that level of protection, right? And so now, we find that we're still responding to them, we're still having them and responding to them in the same ways we would have as a primitive people. But right now they're not serving us, and we don't really need to do that.
I love that.
sometimes we need to, like crossing the street or, doing something that's inherently dangerous, right? But, think about how often, many of us have those thoughts and feelings throughout a given day. And you can see that it's not really something that is supportive in helping us to achieve what we want in life.
It makes me think like you're talking about it's going back to the reptilian brain of fight, flight, or freeze.
Yep.
And then that reminds me of another saying I like as in regarding fear. Is it real or is it perceived? Like, is it a real threat? Like, how much of what I'm thinking of imposter syndrome is true?
Right.
But that also is throwing logic at an emotional problem, and logic and emotion don't go together.
Right.
There has to be, we have to work on the feelings, work on the emotions till we can then get to the point of where we can talk about logic.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Process those emotions first.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Other things we talked about that first time leaders have an issue with is all the additional responsibility they have.
Yeah. Yeah.
Of, I still have to do my work.
Mm-hmm.
And now I have to manage this team.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, that happened to me, earlier in my career when I was, hi, Bill. When I was a new manager, I was given this additional responsibility, but nothing else was taken off my plate, right? So it was, we need a centralized manager for this to manage this set of staff members, and you're it, And so basically that's how it went. And I was happy to take on the responsibility and learn new things and grow the position further. So I was, really eager to do it. And when I think about it, there's so many things I would do differently now. If I were to go back in time and accept that position, that new level of responsibility,
Mm-hmm.
I would, what happened to me is that I took on that additional responsibility and I worked twice as hard. So over the course of 4 or 5 years, I really burnt myself out trying to do it all. I got great results. I was seen as a really strong, member of the department. Just all kinds of accolades and, promotions and things of that nature. But it took a toll on me, my health and my family life really suffered. And it's not something that I would ever do again in terms of sacrificing those things. So what I would do differently, what I would recommend
Uh-huh.
is that the first, 60 to 90 days, really do an assessment. Take a look at, this new role of management. You're a leader now. So what is your vision for your group, for your team, for your department? And take a look at how can you grow your team? How can you delegate? What are your resources? Do a heavy analysis on all of that and decide what additional resources you need and then ask for them from the very beginning. I did not do that when I started asking for resources 2 or 3 years down the road. It was like, well, why do you need these all of a sudden? There was a ton of resistance, right? Which is understandable because nothing else had changed. It was just I was feeling burnt out and unhealthy and unhappy and needed some help. And it was really hard to get it. In fact, I didn't really get it. So I ended up trying to leave. But yeah, so really doing that analysis the first 60 to 90 days to see what you have to work with, what efficiencies you can increase in your role, how you can further develop staff members and delegate some of your pieces of your work to them that allows them the growth they want and that would be good for them professionally and personally. So really, not just looking at who else can I hire to help me initially, but looking at all these other ways so that you can justify then with your boss, this is how, this is my vision. This is how I've laid it out in terms of resources existing. And this is the new resources that I could really use to do this the right way. So that's what I would suggest.
That reminds me, I'm reading from our notes that we were going to talk about delegating, how to say no, and different ways to say no. So before we get to that, a lot of my clients have a hard time speaking up for themselves. So it's not only saying no, but it's having a conversation and saying, I need this, because then their imposter syndrome comes up and I'm going to get found. Now they're going to know I don't know. So I can't ask for help.
Yeah, it's hard to ask for help.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're in that position of, getting this new promotion and this new job, and wanting to really prove that we have what it takes, right? It can be really hard to ask for help. But there are ways that, there are diplomatic ways of doing that, right? Of, if we're looking at asking for help, it is more about solving your own problems, so it's about looking, as I just said, looking at all the different parameters and coming up with things that you can do yourself before you then go in with the ask for what you need from someone else, right? I'm speaking more about, looking at asking for help from supervisors and people above, right? Yeah, so I don't know if that answers your question.
No, well, what I love about all the difficult questions that first-time leaders and managers deal with, you always acknowledge and say, oh yeah, it's common. Oh yeah, everyone feels like that. You automatically, even me, I'm not even your client, but I'm going, oh yeah, it just feels good to know I'm not alone.
Exactly. Absolutely. I mean, validation, right? It's key for every relationship across the board, from love and family relationships all the way through work and
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, I help my clients to understand their supervisors or their managers or their bosses, right? Whoever they answer to.
Uh-huh.
So I help them figure out, first of all, what are you? Are you visual, auditory, or kinesthetic? What's your learning method? And then I'll say to them, what do you think your boss's learning method is? So very few people are auditory only, very few.
Yeah.
And so I would tell them, when I would go into my boss and I wanted something, I would kind of pave the way to a yes.
Perfect. Yeah.
Right. He was very visual. So I always had a chart, a graph, something.
Right.
And an addenda that a kinesthetic person can hold on to and touch. And so, there's different ways that you can approach your supervisor.
Absolutely.
And then the higher you get up, the more the expectation is that you're going to come with a solution.
That's right.
And that you have thought it out. And depending upon where you are in the organization, have you considered the budget? Have you considered the impact? Have you considered, is this the right time? Do we have the staff? Like a SWOT analysis.
Yes, I think that's important at every level. Honestly,
That's true. Yeah.
At any level that you are, I think it's important to come in with the potential solutions to the problem, the analysis that goes into an ask. Because these questions, you're going to be asked these questions anyhow. So just go in prepared with everything well laid out and thought out before the conversation, right?
To show, and I tell my clients, because you're busy and they're busy.
Right.
So I'm going to make it as easy as possible for this person to say yes.
Yes, that's right.
I'm going to set it up like Jerry Maguire, help me help you.
Exactly.
Like take my part. Part of this relationship with your superior is me.
That's right.
What can I do to move this along?
Right. Yep.
And nothing changes if nothing changes.
Yes.
So if you keep getting no's, then maybe you need to step back and look at something differently.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
I have some other topics that we discussed about. Should I go on, or do you have anything else you wanted to talk about right now? Okay. We talked about that first-time leaders have a hard time setting priorities because now they're multitasking more than they ever have. So what are your thoughts on multitasking and setting priorities and your advice for first-time leaders?
Well, I think multitasking can be really hard. a lot of people now are saying there's no such thing as multitasking. But yeah, it's still something that, that we are called to do in the workplace, in a lot of workplaces. So I think trying to minimize it, though, that's my approach, is try to minimize the multitasking as much as possible, because it's really hard to do a good job on anything when you've got so many different competing things happening at once. So that's where the prioritization comes into place, is what needs my attention and focus right now. And I think a big part of that is going back to, what are your initiatives? What are the goals of your department? What's the vision? And the timelines. So, when does this need to be done? And also looking at who else can do this. Those are some questions to ask, I think, when you're looking at, what do I absolutely have to do today versus what can happen tomorrow, right? So those are sorts of things I recommend to people, is to just take a hard look at how important is it that all of this be done today. And if all of it has to be done yesterday, and you have today to do it, who else can help you do that?
I love that. Who else can? And then that comes the relationship with your superior, because hopefully you've discussed priorities.
Yes.
And deadlines.
Right. Open communication on those is really important, I think.
And it seems really scary to say, well, when do you need this, to your boss? But it actually helps a lot.
Absolutely. I mean, if you don't ask, you get in trouble.
It's scary to say anything back to the boss, but you can say, hey, when did you need this? It's a simple question. When did you need this? And now we're again in a relationship.
Yes.
It's a reciprocal relationship.
Yes.
So I've had bosses say, oh my gosh, is there any way I could have it by the end of the day?
Yeah.
And then I've had bosses say, oh, this is no priority. Put this at the bottom of your list. Yeah. So now automatically I'm like, whew, because I really can't handle another thing.
Right.
So he said, okay, put it at the bottom of your list. Okay, done.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then tag it for some time down the road, check back with them, or, see when you can squeeze it in.
Yeah. I've seen for others on my team how important communication was in that regard. I managed, my prior job, I managed team members who worked with attorneys. And so there was one particular person who was struggling, who was super intimidated by the attorney she was working with. And she wasn't communicating. So she wasn't asking that crucial question that you just brought up. She wasn't asking, what's our deadline? And she wasn't able to communicate that she had too much on her plate. And so there was a breakdown of communication. And what happened was the attorney was feeling like this person, was dropping all the balls and wasn't able to do her job. And so there was a lot of work for me to do in that, to get those people talking and communicating effectively so that they could work out the priorities for the day.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's why I encourage my clients to meet with, okay, so let's get back to the first-time supervisors.
Yes.
I encourage them to meet with their staff at least once a week, individually, whenever possible. So then the same with your boss above you, having the courage, and I help people with the wording. I can help you with the exact wording that you can say that you're comfortable with. I would be more efficient if I could meet with you on a weekly basis.
Yeah.
And then, so as the first-time supervisor or manager or leader, you have your people bringing the agenda.
Yes.
So now with the person above you, you bring the agenda.
Yes.
So that it's not like we're just getting together every week because, we don't really have anything. I have an agenda. And I'm going to bring to you only the things I need your help with.
Yeah, that's super. I mean, I did a lot of that with my staff. I met with everyone once a week individually. And then every few weeks, I think it was every 3 to 4 weeks, we met as a group. And I would share updates on what was happening around the organization and things I was learning about that, just to make sure that they were in the know about everything that's going on around them.
Mm-hmm.
That they wouldn't otherwise know. And we did training, we did a lot of stuff during those meetings. But the individual meetings are, I found as a manager, as helpful for me as I hoped it was for them, right? Because I understood what challenges they were facing, so that I could jump in and help if they needed that help, right? If there was some sort of institutional bureaucracy going on, is there a way that we can, cut through that so that they can be more effective in their jobs? And really, as a first-time manager, my mission, one of my missions was to help my team members succeed in their jobs. That's how I viewed a big part of my role as a manager was how can I help you be successful and do well. So.
And everyone wants you to be successful. No matter if the person you work with, and I've worked for narcissists before, one in particular, and even as nasty as he was, he really just wanted people to be successful so that it was less work for him.
Yeah.
So and we just don't communicate. We just don't tell our expectations and what you can expect of me and what I expect of you.
Right. It's so, everyone says communication is key, and it's so true. So true in the workplace.
So then I have like clients that say, well, I have to work 24 hours. I have to be by my phone all the time because I get I get texts and I get emails, and I'll say, have you had a conversation? Like, if that were me, sometimes that's the time I got to it. Doesn't mean I want you to respond. So what would it be like for you to have a conversation with your boss saying, what is your expectation? When I get an email at midnight, are you expecting me to respond? What is, and then you can make decisions about your life based on the facts that you're getting.
Right.
If the person is saying, of course, I need you to call me, right back, or whatever, that might be something that you're going to investigate that you're not willing to do.
Right.
For your work-life balance. But before that, it's just an assumption.
It's yeah. Don't assume that you get the email at 1 o'clock in the morning that person's expecting a response right away. Many times I found that, managers do that to get something off their minds. Oh, it's just we're human beings. We wake up and they're like, oh, I forgot to do that, or I forgot to ask so for something, and so they just send off an email. Done. I've asked. I go back to sleep.
Exactly.
And so I think you're spot on, Joan. It's so important to ask those questions. What are the expectations? Otherwise, you don't know, and many times we're driving ourselves crazy unnecessarily. And we're worried about, slippage on boundaries when maybe there isn't any at all. We're just creating that for ourselves. So, yeah, we can't really work with how to run our lives if we're just making assumptions on those sorts of things.
And so the same for the first-time supervisor or manager, leader. If that's how you are, if that's how you work, like maybe you took 3 hours to get the kids to bed, to have a nice dinner, to get the kitchen cleaned up, to watch your favorite show, and now you're going to work for an hour or so before you go to work. Let your staff know, I don't expect a response.
That's right. Absolutely.
So that kind of goes back to setting priorities and agreeing on your priorities.
Yes. And I think setting boundaries is an important part. We touched a little bit on that earlier, just the, it goes back to when you're a first time manager and you do that analysis, right? Of, this is what I have to work with. This is the amount of time that I can see myself working every day, 8, 9, 10 hours, whatever it is. And this is what I can accomplish. And working with your manager, your supervisor, your boss on how to, create the expectations around those boundaries too, so that everyone's in the know. I mean, it doesn't have to be, you don't have to be rigid, but at least having that set up for yourself will create ways that you can manage your life a lot easier, right? and make you happier because you understand that there's not a lot of pressure to get things done after hours unless, maybe certain circumstances. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
And a part of boundaries, I always think, is that we teach people how to treat us.
Hmm.
What are your thoughts on that?
That's interesting. Yeah, no, I think that's true. Um, because if we're respecting ourselves by setting those boundaries, then we're showing other people that because we respect ourselves, we're looking for respect from others as well, right? And again, treating others with respect. We're treating our families with respect by having work boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's a very good point.
And I think also, what are your thoughts on that? By you doing it, it gives permission to other people to do it. Like if you're clear on, like, I was trying to work with a client who at least 2 days a week, she would go home on time.
Okay.
And I said, what would it be like if you all got together and said, I'm leaving on time on Wednesday. He's going to be here on Thursday. She's going to be here on Monday. And that you all respected each other. And that if something was an emergency, first of all, define an emergency.
Right.
There's very few things, we're not transplanting a heart. There's things that most things can wait till tomorrow.
Right. Absolutely.
And I'm getting a little off track, and I tell my people, let some of the stuff sit. And you'll be surprised how much resolves itself.
That's so true. I used to work with someone who was not great about answering her email, so I knew I just had to go track her down in person, right? And I came up in conversation once with her. She was a faculty member and an attorney, and she's like, well, I just find that 95% of email questions resolve themselves, so I don't really pay that much attention. So I don't know if it's a great policy, but it was true. I mean, what you said resonated with what she had said. So
it was so funny.
Yeah.
Some people would be so offended, but other people would say she's very efficient.
Smart. Yeah.
Yeah, I learned that from a boss, one of my best bosses. I've had two really good bosses, and this one, he would literally say, let that one sit. Let that one sit over the weekend. And I would go, oh, okay. And not to give anyone the impression that I was ever on top of my emails, because I have never in my life been on top of my emails. But, but I learned, like, oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then another trick, since we're on that, another trick is people are so brave in an email. Now you pick up the phone and you're going to get a different person. And as we can't do it right now because of COVID, but eventually we'll be able to do it again, to meet someone in person, say, hey, can you come to the office? Of course, depending upon your job, this and that, right?
Right.
But what I'm trying to say is people have a lot of guts tapping the keyboard.
Yeah.
So when I get people on the phone, they're a completely different person.
Interesting.
When I meet them in person, it's 180 from the email.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In person is such a better way to communicate.
Yeah.
In general. Because we all know the problems with email. It's fast, it's easy. There's a lot of good things about it, but it's hard to read between the lines sometimes and get the right tone and get the right feeling across. That is just so much more achievable in person.
As often as possible. Sometimes I say to clients, I'm much older. I'm older than I don't want to say most people, but what would it be like if you called them?
Yeah.
So I worked for the government most of my life, and so I have had several clients in the government, and I said, what would it be like if someone from the city that you live in called you? What would that be like? You would be like, oh my God, the city is calling me. So
there's power in that. There's power in that.
And it diffuses their, oh, okay, you actually are calling me.
Yeah.
I'm a person, so you can stop yelling or cursing at me or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, it does diffuse the situation. It gives you the opportunity to diffuse it. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, here's another big one that a lot of people talk to me about is managing an inherited employee that is an underperformer.
Yes, that is really tough, right? This, sometimes the situation might have been going on for a while, and then you step in, and it's an instant thing that's there that needs to be addressed. Um, and you're also coming in at a point where you're trying to gain trust and mutual respect, as a new manager with
Right.
team members. And so that makes it even a little bit more challenging, right? To start off the bat with, let's talk about your performance or lack thereof, right?
Mhm.
So, but again, this is where, coming at it from a human perspective,
Mhm.
one of, concern and seeking to understand what's happening
Mhm.
without blaming or just being a human being, like, what is going on, this is what's happening, what are you experiencing when this what just trying to understand what's going on in someone else's shoes and
Mhm.
hearing them out.
Mhm.
For me, that's what that helped me a lot, is and also, showing genuine concern. If there's something that's been going on for a while. I had someone who was calling in sick a lot on Mondays and Fridays, and just, asking, are you okay? Is everything okay? And explaining, you have a right to your sick leave, absolutely. I'm not ever going to say otherwise, but just so you understand, this is what's happening in the department when you're not here on these Mondays and Fridays.
Mhm.
And just having that kind of conversation, and in that instance, that really worked in with that person. I mean, she, we talked about what's going on. I told her, I don't need to hear anything personal or private. Don't feel you have to share anything of that nature. I just want you to know that I'm here, and I want you to know that I'm wanting to help you in any way that I can, and I want to figure out how we can work together to mitigate this if there's any possible way. And
Mhm.
so at the end of our conversation, the problem was solved. I mean, it wasn't like she never called in sick again, but it was vastly reduced. And she thanked me for the conversation a week later, which I almost fell out of my chair when she did. But it was because I think she felt like I wasn't penalizing her for those, which I would never do. But she also felt like I was there to help her, and she appreciated that. And so, that's a suggestion I would have, is just approach it from a human perspective of trying to understand, trying to help, and see what happens.
Yeah, and as you're speaking, it's reminding me that most companies have, in government, it's called EAP, Employees Assistance,
Yes,
and so whatever your organization calls is some place where you can call, like an 800 number, and
yes,
talk to a counselor, or if you're possibly going through bankruptcy, they have all kinds of help you can have. So I try to bring that up. You might want to go to
absolutely.
EAP. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. Whatever resources the company provides along that, and like you said, many big organizations have the EAP,
Hmm.
um, and I feel like they just keep getting more robust, those services,
Hmm.
which is really great.
Right. It
Yeah,
is. It's a great time to be alive, I'll tell
yeah,
you.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
it really is.
And that reminds me of, that sometimes I tell them, and when that doesn't work,
Hmm.
you are hired to be the leader. So it's sometimes you are going to have to actually put your grown-up panties on, you know and you're never alone. That's what HR is for.
Hmm.
That's
Yes,
what your legal team is for.
that's right.
That's why you need document.
Yes,
That's why you need to be specific in your when you're speaking with someone. The metrics that you give them have to be very specific,
right.
so that it's clear that they missed the mark. It's not ambiguous.
It's not ambiguous. That's right.
It's not like, I need you to improve your report writing by next week.
No, right.
It has to be much clearer than that. What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. I mean, my approach is always just try the human approach first, see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
It really depends on the circumstances, right? I mean, it really just depends on the circumstances. Um, but at times you are as a manager, you're going to have those difficult conversations, where it's about, you have to talk with someone about a performance improvement plan, right? And it is so important. I totally agree with you, Joan, that to have those specifics laid out and to keep track
Mm-hmm.
of those,
Mm-hmm.
and documentation as well. And absolutely go to HR. Go to
Mm-hmm.
HR as your first stop. If you haven't done it before, go to HR. Companies differ on, there's laws, right, that HR follows, but companies differ on their internal policies as well. I work for an organization that rarely let anyone go, and so there was,
Exactly.
yes, you can relate to that, yeah. So heavy documentation, a lot of work, a lot of hand holding, and I think very employee focused, which is great. And so you really want to get informed as a new manager when you're in first get an inkling that you have a performance issue in your hands that can't be
Mm-hmm.
resolved through other means.
Mm-hmm.
To stay ahead of that,
Mm-hmm.
getting in touch with HR and working through it.
Yeah, and always and keeping your next level informed.
Yes, absolutely.
And then I tell them to make sure that the employee knows how serious it is.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Like, I need you to hear, because the employee is often good at distractions, or, yeah, but Sue's not doing it. And did you know that Charlie does this? And and then I just tell them, have like 2 or 3 bullet points that you want to discuss. Bring it whenever they go like this. You bring it back to yes, and you have been late. Like your employee, you have been late.
Right.
And I need you to hear the next step is a performance improvement plan.
Yes.
I need you to hear that this is going to go to the next step. It's going to go past the verbal counseling into written and in your file and all that,
Right.
so that they're not surprised. What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely no surprises.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll just say also, there should be no surprises on the annual or routine performance evaluation
Mm-hmm.
either.
Mm-hmm.
The way my approach was always, when we sit down to have that meeting and when there's a written document, especially that's going in someone's file, there should be no surprises. There should not be anything written negatively that has not been discussed
Mm-hmm.
a number of times before it goes into writing or becomes an official part of the review, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's why the communication again, the meetings, the feedback, all of that can take time. But it is so important to management for people to understand where they're standing. These days, younger generations than mine, I'm sure there are several now, workforce, really want the feedback. Really want the feedback, and so and it's so it's really important, I think, to provide that and to let them know where they stand, so that things can be corrected. It's not fair. It's not fair to put something in writing if there hasn't been a chance for correction like that.
What would it, I often think, like, what would it have been like if when I was in my 20s, someone just said, Joan, let me give you a couple pointers. Let me help you out a little bit, instead of me just constantly floundering. And so it is, if someone's taken the time to give you feedback, even negative, it's a gift.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. And again, there's that mindset.
exactly.
How are we going to receive that feedback?
Right.
We have choices for how to receive it, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think I have covered everything. Let's see. We did multitasking. We did setting priorities. We did imposter syndrome, additional responsibilities, delegating and saying no, boundary settings, managing inherited underperformer. I think we have covered and chronic stress, work-life balance, we kind of mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything else you wanted to add for our first-time leaders?
One thing I would add is two things actually. I would say one is continuous learning. Your company may or may not have a training program for you as a first-time leader, first-time manager. A lot of companies do, some don't. Either way, just keep reading more. Look online if you have questions. How do other managers do things? Talk with people at a peer level in your organization. Look for webinars that are relevant to the work that you do in management. These are all things that I did as a new leader, was, just to get informed of best practices, because there was no manual for me. I didn't have anything either. So I just sort of had to wing it and figure out, one thing I really turned to a lot were TED Talks. I loved watching TED Talks on management and communication. That was really helpful for me at the time. So just find those sources for yourself, identify what they are, and just spend a certain amount of time every day or every week engaging in that course of learning for yourself. And then also, as you get more experience, this is the second piece of advice or suggestion I would give out, is that mentor other new leaders, gain experience.
That's awesome.
Just pay it forward, because it can be really hard to start out not really having the experience and trying to proactively gain it and learn it, sometimes the hard way on the job. So reach out to other newer managers and have coffee and just have conversation.
Coffee and conversation, easy.
Yeah.
And again, what a great time to be alive, because you can listen to a podcast when you're in the car. You can put your earphones on when you're doing something monotonous and listen to a TED Talk. It's all things you can do.
Absolutely.
So I appreciate that. I think that's awesome. Continuous learning, watch TED Talks, listen to podcasts, coffee and conversation. And I love that you said mentor people, because the learning, you're instilling your own learning.
Yes.
It's like I learn best by teaching someone else.
Right. You're reinforcing it.
You're reinforcing it.
Yeah. And you're instilling it hopefully in someone else and paying it forward, right?
I'd love to pay it forward.
Yeah.
Okay, Judy, what is your contact information? How can someone get a hold of you if they want to get a hold of you?
Absolutely. My email address is a good way. That's judy@accclifecoaching.com. And my web address at Accomplished Life Coaching and Consulting is acclifecoaching.com. Awesome.
And are you on LinkedIn?
I'm on LinkedIn, Judy-Gielniak.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah. So, if anyone wants to chat about anything, I love helping people. I love having conversations.
Do you like coffee?
I love coffee. Look, I have some right here.
Coffee.
Oh, now.
Coffee and conversation with Judy. Exactly.
Yeah. Anytime.
Awesome. Okay, everyone who's listening and watching, either live or recorded, thank you for joining us for another episode on being a first-time leader. My guest is Judy Gielniak, and we're signing off for today. We'll see you next Tuesday. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.